Hi friends. All right, we have a lot to catch up on. So I am going to talk about what happened in Houston, why I clearly have not had surgery yet, and what we went through from the insurance standpoint. And my hope is, and the reason why I'm sharing all this is, while I hope that you never have any kind of health condition that requires you to have assistance and health care provided for it, if you are, I hope that what I went through over the past week and a half can serve as a guide to make the process easier for you and hopefully to get you the treatment you need quicker than what I just went through. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, just a quick reminder of everything. So I started having wrist pain about a year ago to the day, actually to the week, was the first appointment I had had with an orthopedic surgeon. I went through 7 months of varying treatments, everything from bracing to icing to taking anti-inflammatories, having a nerve study done, physical therapy. We went through a lot of things. Nothing helped it. So in August I had an MRI, and at the MRI is when I learned that I had early stage avascular necrosis of the lunate bones, suggesting Kienbock's disease. That's exactly what Kienbocks is. It's when you lose the blood supply to the lunate, which is one of 8 bones in your wrist, and it is the primary bone responsible for extension and flexion. So I knew within about a 2-minute internet search what I was dealing with was pretty significant. And to give you a statistic on how rare this is, out of 100,000 wrists that are scanned, 7 of them will have Kienbocks. And so imagine for every x-ray, CT scan, MRI a surgeon might see, of 100,000, 7 will come back Kienbocks. And so the probability that a wrist surgeon sees a lot of Kienbocks cases is just not very high. So over the last, 6 months, I've been in the short cast, and then I had a brace as well. Come November, I knew it was getting worse. I could feel, it felt like broken glass in my wrist even more, and so I knew it was kind of time for me to branch out. I had gotten a CT scan, and then I also had reached out to 2 out-of-state surgeons who specialize in Kienbocks. I'm a part of several Facebook support groups, and this is primarily where I learned about them. So I got in the CT scan, and I sent it out to the 2 out-of-state surgeons, and then also had on the books my meeting with the surgeon that I've been working with. So I'm just going to regroup all of the information and the surgical recommendations. So I send it out. One of the 2 out-of-state surgeons contacts me pretty immediately, and this is before I even see my doctor in state, and says, huge emergency, you're in a tough spot, like you don't have a lot of time. There's an option for you on the board where you might be able to save what you still have in there, and it's called an MFT flap. And what that means is we're going to graft out of your knee joint bone, blood vessels, cartilage to replace the fact that your bone, instead of looking, fancy pictures, see, this bone here is your lunate. So on top of it's the capitate, another wrist bone. Down here, ulna radius, are your arm bones. So your lunate sits between the capitate and then the arm bones. So you'll see here, it's kind of rounded, it's full. I've said this before. My bone now looks jaggedy. It's got this plow, is what the doctor in Houston calls it, and it's got fragments down here. And so what happens when all that starts to deteriorate, you are losing cartilage because there's no viable bone to support the cartilage. Cartilage is not vascularized, so it needs bone to live on. And so when it starts to die off, you're losing cartilage by default. So his explanation of that was we can try to revive it at this point if we can catch it. While you have to have 2 things to be able to do this. The capitate side, this side, you have to have enough bone integrity right here at the top, not much, just enough that it can support a bone graft. So we have to make sure this hasn't started to deteriorate, and we have to make sure down by your arm bones that you still have viable cartilage, because what happens when raw bone is rubbing in any part of your body, it's eating away at the other cartilage around it. So if you no longer have cartilage protecting your arm bone, this isn't going to be an option we should move with, because it's very likely within 2 to 3 years you're going to burn through this horrible surgery that is involving not only your wrist but now your leg, 2 extremities at one time. He's like, why would it be bad medical practice for me to do that to you knowing this wasn't going to last? So that was his recommendation, is let's give it a shot. It's saving what you have. Fine. Big recommendation, considering to this point, I have been told it's not very severe, that let's continue to go for moderate treatment, just very local with staying on the brace, whatever. I see my primary physician that I've been working with, and he explains to me, like, it does look like there's some fragmentation, it looks like there's a little bit of collapse, possible cartilage damage. His opinion is, let's go a conservative treatment route, let's not go for the big guns. So he suggested what's called core decompression with a pin through my scaphoid and capitate together. So what the pin would do is get pressure off of the lunate bone. The core decompression would be drilling a hole through one of my arm bones to simulate a fracture, and the reason they do that is because the theory of it is that it pumps blood because your body's trying to repair a broken bone, and by default your hand and wrists are going to get more of a blood flow. It allows the opportunity with less pressure on the bone to get more blood flow in to allow the bone to heal. Okay, that doesn't fix the horribly fragmented and broken down bone, nor does it fix the lack of cartilage now in the wrist, likely. So I wasn't very convinced about that treatment option out the gate. I then talked to, so now I have from Houston, big recommendation, 911, go now. Second recommendation, let's go conservative. Not a big to-do, fine. Third recommendation comes from another specialist out of town, and he tells me, he has my CT scan and my MRI, no x-rays. He tells me the CT scan was not shot well, it's difficult to see based on what he's saying. He doesn't feel like this is an urgent situation. I think you should consider just shortening your capitate, and let's see what happens. So essentially what that means, this bone that sits on top, he's suggesting we fracture it, we saw out a couple millimeters, we pin everything together to offload the lunate, and hopefully this promotes healing of this bone. Okay, this still doesn't fix the broken down bone nor the cartilage damage that's in there. Fine. He recommends I see a specialist at the University of Michigan, and he gave me 3 names as reference points since he doesn't have x-rays. He's like, I would consult with them. He also said, feel free to call me back if you have more questions. I'm happy to be someone that you run things past, which is awesome to have someone in your corner like that. I go to University of Michigan. This is now the 4th surgeon. So now I have Houston, 911, big situation. Local surgeon, not that big of a situation. Core decompression. 3rd surgeon from out of town. Don't know, can't really see on the CT scan. Let's go capitate shortening. I have 3 recommendations on 3 different surgeries to consider. 4th, we go to University of Michigan, and immediately, like right out the gate, he has to understand what it is I do for a living and what my passions are. After knowing that, immediately, this is bad. It's progressed more. They took new x-rays. It's clear. It's now collapsing. It's losing height on the bone, which is not great from the sagittal view, which is the side. You can see it now. And he says there's no surgery, no surgeon who's ever going to deliver you what you used to be able to do. My recommendation to you is to do a wrist fusion. And what that means is they take all 8 bones in your wrist and fuse them together into one hunk of bone, and put a plate from about your mid-hand to about this part of your arm. And after several years, you can have that plate removed, but you will never, ever do that again in your whole life. He did say we could try the capitate shortening, the one the other specialist recommended. However, he said, given what he's seeing on imaging, it's clear I have cartilage damage because some of my other wrist bones are starting to move. They haven't significantly, but they are starting to migrate. He said it comes with a 5% or less chance. That's not great odds, to say the least. And then he leaves me with saying, this is urgent. You should not be taking a long time to make a decision at this point. So, and this is my recap the other week. Now I have 2 surgeons telling me, not that serious, 2 surgeons telling me, it's serious, you need to move now. I now have 4 different surgeries on the table. Core decompression, capitate shortening, times 2 potentially, but one of them saying 5% chance. I have the MFT and then a full fusion. If you can imagine how confusing this is, it has been beyond frustrating, and that's why I had shown you all the research I have done to this point. Now, this past Friday, I had gotten a call from the other specialist out of town, and he had seen my updated x-rays. The University of Michigan sent them to him. I also sent him my x-rays from November. He calls me and he says, I acknowledge the fact that there has been significant progression in a 2-month span. He's like, I would not recommend a wrist fusion at 35 years old. You're too young. There are so many other options. He's like, I highly suggest you find another surgeon to speak to. He's like, there's something called a PRC you could consider. It's a proximal row carpectomy, and that's the one where they remove all 3 bones off the bottom line of your wrist joint. I don't love that option because general teaching, if you already have cartilage damage, don't do that, because eventually what's going to happen is now the dynamics and the forces in your wrist are going to start to change when you start to load your wrist again. And over time, it's going to create more cartilage damage, and you're likely going to end up in so much pain down the road, you would need a wrist fusion. Now, if I was someone who, and this is, I'm not judging anybody's life, but if I was someone that had a desk job or something where I wasn't as active on my hands, that might be an option I would consider. But given my lifestyle, I just don't feel like in my heart of hearts that's the right way to go. However, his phone call on Friday validated the fact that this is urgent, because now I have 3 surgeons telling me you need to do something extreme about what's happening in your wrist. And the fact of the matter is, the doctor in Houston, and the reason why I went to Houston, is the only surgeon who offers options that do not include having to take out multiple bones in my wrists and at least have a 50% chance of working. And at this point, 50 is better than 5. So I have chosen to go with the MFT, the knee joint surgery, as my plan A. The other reason I chose this surgeon is he is not going to go in and do something he does not feel medically confident is going to work for me down the line. So I explained to you, I have to pass 2 checkpoints. If I don't, I have opted for a prosthetic lunate bone called a Pyrocarbon implant. And so what happens with that one is that that's the one I explained. They would put in the implant, graft it with tendons. Now, that is what I have agreed to, and I think is the best route for me to preserve my wrist function as much as possible and also maintain the things that I hope to be able and aspire to do again one day. So in comes the insurance thing that we had dealt with. I had found out the Tuesday before we were going down that we were not approved. Now, mind you, I knew prior that we weren't approved, but they told me, give it a couple more days, we just sent new information. When I spoke with them on that Tuesday, I ended up hours on the phone speaking with the approver, and she explained to me, this is a very rare condition. We have never seen it before. Remember, I told you guys this is very rare. In all her years of approving claims, she's never once seen this. She said there's 56 pages of clinical data. That's just my point, just 56 pages of things I have to document everything I've done with my surgeons to date, as well as the x-ray imaging to support everything. She did acknowledge, again, it's medically necessary. I can see that you need treatment, but we need to have your surgical plan and that you have signed off on it. Fine, we're going to Houston Friday. She said, great, please submit after that appointment an urgent request for review. We know your surgery is scheduled Sunday. Awesome, I'm gonna get you what you need. They submit the information, and at the time, and I should say before I go into all this, we have phenomenal insurance coverage. We have, I mean, once this all passes through, it's 100% coverage for medically necessary treatments. And reading through all research, once you're at this point, unless you medically intervene, you aren't fixing it. It's going to lead to complete joint destruction within about 3 to 5 years. And at this point, for me, for whatever reason, I'm progressing horribly fast. So, anyways, worth noting as I talk about this. So the insurance company, and I believe it works this way with all, they send it out to a third party to review, give them the recommendation, insurance company follows suit. So I had spoken to the third party, and they're the ones who said submit the urgent claim so we can get pushed through. The insurance company said it would help you to do a simultaneous internal expedited review, because what that means is we are going to review at the same time. So if the third party says yes, we approve, we follow their suit. If we say yes and decide on our own yes, whatever, you have 2 shots at getting a yes at the same time. Awesome, cool. So we submit everything Friday, don't hear anything. I hear from a grievance counselor at the insurance company that it is in process, and she just explains to me what the steps are at this point. Explains to me they're well aware surgery is scheduled for Sunday. We have until noon on Saturday to get the approvals. Otherwise, surgery will be canceled. So I get a phone call at noon Saturday. Nothing's come through. Unfortunately, surgery has to be canceled. Figured we wouldn't hear anything Sunday, as we didn't. Monday, we get a phone call. Your claim was denied on both the third party and the insurance company side, so both agencies denied me, which was devastating to hear, because my understanding was I needed to give you the fact that I had seen the surgeon. He gave, though it wasn't a horribly extensive, and I do acknowledge that, extensive write-up of the surgery plan, it had everything in there. And so I'm going to read verbatim what it said. Our review determined that criteria were not met for your surgery because you do not have stage 1 through 4 Kienbock's disease of your wrist. Your current condition, as documented by x-ray findings, shows that the severity of your condition does not meet criteria for coverage. And third, there was no documented pain and functional disability that interferes with your daily activities. If you can imagine how angry I was getting that information over the phone, for anybody who's been around me in any capacity in the past 6 months, you'll know for a fact the pain one, at a minimum, is unfortunately a lie, and that's very much so found in my notes. So we hadn't booked a return flight because we didn't know what was going to happen with my surgery. If I end up having the knee surgery, it requires a 4 or 5 day hospital stay because they have to monitor my vitals and control them so much because of how we just reconstructed everything in my hand. If we go with the prosthetic, it'll be an outpatient. So we didn't book return flights not knowing. So at this point, we get that phone call and we say, shoot, like I guess we're going to be going home. So I call the doctor's office to ask to get the fax because I need to get all the paperwork. What's going to happen now is we have to file with the state, and the state has an agency run through the State Department that oversees the insurance companies, and if you want to and you need to, you can file an external review, meaning the State Department's going to review the case through an independent party, someone relative to your field, and they can overturn the decision, and the insurance company has to accept that decision. So I found out that I can do what's called an expedited external review, and what that means is they have 72 hours to determine their outcome, how they feel it should be treated. But you can only do that if your situation is life-threatening or it could alter your treatment. And for me, it could alter my treatment because if I continue down this path and it's getting worse, I'm going to have to go with the prosthetic that isn't my plan A. That's my plan B. But the more time that passes, things are deteriorating without me doing much in life anyways. So, anyways, we call the office and they say, would you be open to coming in for an appointment tomorrow with the doctor? He wants to sit down. He wants to go through the denial with you. Awesome. Cool. We're going to stay in town. We're going to file the 72-hour appeal. Maybe we'll get approval and still be able to have surgery on the weekend. That's why we stayed in Houston. So we go in the next day. We meet with the doctor. He was hot. I do mean hot. Like just ticked at the information that we were given, and rightfully so. I will not go into great detail about what he wrote, though he did write quite a bit back in response to my treatment and the why behind my treatment. But the 2 things I do want to read, because I think it's really cool when your medical team goes to bat for you and why you should be having stuff done. To be crystal clear, the denial letter contains multiple blatant lies. Let me repeat, blatant lies. At the end of it, he also ends it with shame to all those who sell out their medical licenses for profit and are willing to lie for personal gain. So if you can imagine, the whole tone of this letter was a bit intense. However, he obviously understands the path of this disease, and if you don't seek treatment quickly, you could pass through, unfortunately, this transitional period where I have this option on the table, and I might not be able to get this option because feet are being dragged on this. Now, all that being said, this insurance claim got sticky because, unfortunately, and I'm not downplaying any surgery. I don't want to make it sound that way because I do understand all surgery is serious, all serious, very serious when it comes to surgery. My situation is so unique in the fact that I found a surgeon who's not just going to say, okay, we're going to go in, we're going to do this, let's see what happens. He's going in and to the best of his medical knowledge, he's going to make the treatment plan for me on site. So we're going to go in, we're going to evaluate it. If it's good, we're going to go through plan A. If not, we're going to have to shift to plan B. So all of these codes required, there were 6 of them, and that's a lot. And this is what they tried to explain to me at insurance too, is, well, there's just a lot of coding. You guys should consider cutting it down. You can't cut it down. And the reason is because I'm not trying to have super surgery. We're trying to make sure that we have the options in place though. So if we go in there and it's not looking good, we know what's going to happen next. And you want to defend the opposite side. That is the defense for it, is yes, it was a lot of coding, but it was a lot of coding because it's not just one plan. There needs to be multiple, and both of these major reconstructive surgeries require multiple codes within one surgery. Anyways, so we went in, we saw the surgeon, he wrote that very passionate letter. We then spent 4 hours in the office, and this is what I want to show and what might help you. I kept that Bible of information for a reason in that binder. Every office visit, every single CT scan, x-ray, MRI, surgeon's comments. This was the denial letter. I went through and highlighted everything. So like, for example, patient reports pain is significantly worsened with activity. She is a fitness trainer at Orangetheory Fitness and states any sort of loading across the wrist or repetitive movements aggravate her symptoms. Stuff like that, just to prove the fact that what was being told to me should not be a determining factor because I have the documentation to prove it. So I submitted all of these. I also numbered all of my pages in the top corner, and then I personally wrote a letter to go with it, 2-page letter. I explained my case, I explained why it was denied, and then I provided the bullet points with the page numbers as well as the dates so that they could be pulled off and they would see exactly what it is I was talking about. And I do believe that helped immensely because when I saw the whole write-up, it was 11 pages that came. The person who reviewed my case externally from the state is an orthopedic surgeon. He has treated patients for this. There's also an attorney that went through all my documentation as well. They referenced every page number and every date that I gave. And so I think it just played well into my favor having all of the supporting documents. Thank God I traveled with it knowing, I mean, I guess I didn't know I was going to have to go through this, but I've spent months learning about Kienbocks and documenting everything I've been through, and I didn't realize it until Friday, right before, or Thursday, I believe, before we got the decision, that everything I've taken time and invested my time and efforts into learning about it and documenting it came to fruition when I had to fight for my own care this past week. And thankfully they came back, they appealed it. They actually said that I should not fall into their category of wrist fusion because I am a different circumstance, unfortunately. And he explains this. They're going in to make the best educated decision on site with surgery. And because of that, you have to be able to process all of this coding and also recognizing if you don't allow this patient to get treatment, she is doomed to a collapsed wrist in a very short period of time. So it did get overturned. However, the doctor's office needs a hard copy of the authorization and approval codes, and of course, that did not come through on Friday, which meant I couldn't have surgery this Sunday. So, surgery is scheduled for 1 week from today. I'm following up with the insurance company tomorrow to make sure that they get to the surgeon's office exactly what they need. I was warned that the insurance company has the ability to appeal the decision. However, I was told by the state agency that very rarely happens. So we are going to keep fingers crossed. And I know this was a lot of information, but again, I think this is hugely beneficial for any person that might have to battle for what is medically necessary to help get you back to where you want to be. So we'll talk more this week about what is to come, but that is what happened over the past 10 days. We have the approval. I can finally sleep, and I slept until 11 o'clock today, which is very uncharacteristic. But this week is just about relaxing, centering myself, and getting mentally prepared now for the next step. So it's been a ride, but I am more than happy to finally be closing this chapter and to start getting into the next chapter of healing. But as I kept saying, you got to advocate for yourself, and I never thought in any capacity I would have to go to bat the way I did this past week. You never know, but you got to be prepared, and you have to have your own back. So keep it in mind with anything you're dealing with. You gotta do the legwork. You gotta do it for you. So it'll pay off. It certainly did here. We'll talk soon.